a place classic for medieval history. So my presence here is linked to the fact that I am a member of the LEAD, Laboratoire Interdisciplinaire des Énergies de Demain. That is an interdisciplinary institute of the University Paris Diderot and the CNRS, where the project is and has been from the beginning not to take care of what is exactly intended by energy. Energy is what every member of this institute decides to take as energy. It is a very big social and economic problem with obvious physical and biological and every kind of scientific aspect, but all the problems of energy in interdisciplinary, from interdisciplinary point of view, have to be addressed from exact science. I don't know whether it's true, whether it's the good expression, and social and human science. So we have to cross in our inquiries the humanities and hard science. So from my own topic of research was originally technological history. I made my PhD on the iron production in the Middle Ages. And it's 20 years after that from some physicist colleagues, I learned that I was an historian of energy. Except for the latest part of industrial society, there are no such thing as historian of energy. We are historian of resources, technology, economy, markets, and we deal with something we call, or we could call, energy to agree between us. So my presentation will be, as you see, I redone it every evening since I arrived, because I didn't want exactly what was expected from me, and probably nothing special. But I have to find it, and I tried to find some questions which are important for me. The first question I will address. I was struck by the strange statute of history in most of the presentation. Climatologists speak about history because they have history in their dominion, but it's a very strange kind of history for me. But there is, and I will go back on this point, there is something. But what I was astonished by is that in most of the presentation of model and scenarios, there is something which I am familiar with, and which takes the fatal form of exponential figure, and which is the fear of the end of the world. And the first thing, so I put here a figure of the very scary Romanesque figure of the doomsday, because it's the doomsday, the final moment of the judgment of the creatures by the creator. I think that even if the scientific aspect is absolutely obvious, we have to take care that people who are reading or listening to what we say have also preconceived, preformed representations, and something which gave us the choice between collective death or perhaps survival must be addressed very cautiously, because in various religions the choice may be difficult. The end of the world is something we can like. We can wait with very great open expectations. So we have to understand whether we control absolutely the kind of narrative we are giving, especially to the non-scientist public. So for me, it's first point of view. I have very great difficulty to take completely as scientific discourse something which aims toward the ends of the world. It have other aspect in my memory and in my scientific specialty. So I have to say that I was struck by your lesson and the fact that in climatology scenarios go towards the 25th century, because this is the way to cancel the figure of the end of the world, to say we can also make projections for 5 centuries after us, and I think it's something important. So I will stop with millenarist figure, which is the right name of this kind of temptation, and I will go to the question: what is energy in history? I decided not to make a history of energy, and I will explain why, but to explain how we can use history to study energetic problem. And the problem, and it's another important problem, the implicit history that we have in most of the scenario is a strange one, because more or less we have between 1 century and 20 years of memory in the scenario we have seen before. The figures are from the 90s or from the beginning of the 20th century. And this history is completely bad. All the scenarios are how can we go backwards or against the worst threat of industrial society, which is fossil fuel and all the environmental consequences of the industrialization. So it's another problem that implicitly most of the scenarios say that we can save almost nothing of the society from now. We have to invent absolutely a new problem. I don't remember to have seen some scenario who makes the choice between this we have to preserve and this we have to correct. I may have some strange way to listen to the speakers, but history of recent period is, from energetic point of view, bad and a wrong history, and we have to give up with most of our attitudes. So, for me, it's not a problem. I am a historian of much longer period, and I think that we can debate this problem of, is industrial society completely wrong in his organization, but I will go toward to use all, not all the history, but at least 5th century or 8th centuries. My other problem is that we have a difficulty because energy as a commodity, energy as something which has a definition and a measure, is something which doesn't exist before the end of the 19th century. Before, we have candles for the light, wood, coal for heating. We have specific kinds of energetic commodities which never gather in one market. So one problem of energy history is that energy is something like an artifact in history. We have no idea and common idea of what is energy before this period. I will give you some kind of, we have Goethe this morning. This is beautiful English of the 14th century, but I made translation here, but the text is very beautiful. It's an allegoric romance of the 14th century, Piers Plowman, where I found this strange verse. What is it? It is simony to sell that scent is of grace, and that is wit and water and wind and fire the first. These four should be free to all folk that it needeth. What does it mean? That's interesting. We have water, wind and fire. Three of the four fundamental elements. Land, it's difficult to say that land can be sold because land can obviously be sold. What is very interesting is the presence of wit, the knowledge. And the idea which is in this sentence is that these things are, in Latin, res nullius, the thing that belongs to nobody and to everybody, and which no one should own and sell. That is some idea which has something to do with our problematic of energy. The idea that there are resources, not commodities. And I think it's also important because we put it apart, but it's also completely inside the problem to say that knowledge about the world is also some kind of commonwealth, just as wind, fire, and water should be. So it's if we say that in 14th century England already the idea of energy was present, that's not true. but that an idea of commonwealth in which typically energetic goods belong, that is, I think, something important to have a mental frame to address the problem. So now I don't know where it's from internet, it doesn't matter. What it's some kind of exponential, and my problem is that I am here, and anyway, this part is usually considered as of absolutely no importance. And for me, that's an interesting problem. I will take from this book, which is just published 2 weeks ago in Princeton University Press. It's something we have waited for at least 3 years, and it's, I think, an important book. And in this, we have, in the introduction, this figure, which is slightly different, because it's per capita. It's not aggregated amount of energy or of energetical goods. Second thing is, it is said that for the period 1500-1800, the trend is nothing more than a raw estimate, which is, I think, an honest statement. There is something interesting, because you can see that for the author, according to their raw estimate, the quantity of energy available for every individual is downwards during this period. And this we have to understand that it is a time of huge demographic growth, and we have here the idea of an increase of the productivity of energy during this period. And I think that it's an interesting hypothesis. We have here almost completely static technological system, which a great increase of population. So there is, in some place, gains of productivity, which are to be found in some place of the problem. So I will now try to understand what is exactly that historian call energy transition. This is clearly an energy transition. The moment where the stone is prolonged by an handle and became an axe, most very powerful. This is a water mill, as you see. This is another, we are 14th century picture. Another energy transition, very, very strange, because we don't know exactly when it takes place. Invention and first diffusion in the Roman Empire, then kind of collapse, and from the 7th, 8th century, diffusion and massive growth of the equipment of European river with water mills. For example, a recent meeting of archaeologists said that around the year 1000, little water wheels vanish in the state and in the settlements, and we found only big and large water wheel. There is a kind of transition. We don't understand why and how and where is exactly the innovation which put the system from little wheels to great wheels. Another very interesting windmill arrives in the northern Europe at the end of the 12th century. It's something interesting. It's a very long, and we still miss a complete history of windmills, but we can do, because we have the records for this kind of for this period. And my idea is that water mills are intermittent, low tides, frozen river, or massive growth of the river may make the water mill unavailable. The windmill is a solution for the most important work, which is grinding the grain, providing the flour for the bread. So it's interesting to see that problem of intermittency in this kind of system can have a solution, and this solution is something which we usually describe as highly intermittent. Other problem, you find windmill inside the cities. In case of war, when the walls of the city are shut, you can make your floor inside the city. It's very important from a military point of view. Donc, so there is another aspect of complementary system in the windmill. So I will not go towards the big energy transition, which is from renewable towards fossil fuel, that is industrial revolution. I give you some title. Robert Allen recently made a very interesting statement about the fact that this transition towards fossil fuel is more complicated than we can imagine, and more lengthy, and we have to understand that the effect of the massive use of coal are not to be seen inside our economic figures before the year 1830, that is 60 or 70 years after the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So it's not so simple, that it's not so massive that we can imagine. And Louis Hunter made this magnificent book, which is now almost impossible to find, which a very beautiful title, Water Power in the Century of the Steam, to demonstrate that American industrialization is hydraulic dependent, not coal dependent. So we have to be extremely cautious when we decide that industrial society is fossil fuel. It's not so simple, and French industrialization is coal intensive in the north and in the Alsatian part, and is water intensive around Paris. And Paris is the second town, industrial town of the world around 1900. Third Greek book, Kenneth Pomeranz made the hypothesis, which is highly debated, that the divergence between Chinese economy and European economy is mainly a problem of solution to an energy crisis which was the same in China and in Europe at the end of the 18th century. So it's the matter of a huge debate among economic historians. It's useful to know it. What I would want to do now would be to take some cases, little cases, or not little, to explain how we can find evidence of energy problem and energy solution to the problem. What are exactly energy problem in society with all renewable system? And to begin, it's useful to know that before the middle of the 18th century, to have a large date. So in completely renewable economy around the world, we have cities like Paris or London are between 500,000 or 1 million inhabitants. Beijing, Mexico, all are cities with more than 500,000 people. How do you feed, make order, manage cities of 500,000 people without electricity, without refrigeration, without train, without automobile? How do you maintain feeding food, secure food, heat when you are in the north? And just an example, in the middle of the 18th century, Paris had to burn 1 million of metric cube of wood every year. This until the first real ecological crisis of pre-industrial and near-industrial period in 1783, you have 2 million of cubic meters of wood along the river of the Seine. One is drying and the other is ready for to be sold. It's absolutely necessary because from the Middle Ages it's forbidden to have inside the house great quantities of wood. You have only a little trunk in the house with a limited quantity of wood, and you have to take it everywhere, every day. So it's an enormous institutional system who manages the delivery of the wood inside the city. But you have to find that by the Seine arrives also the wine. You don't drink water in pre-industrial society, it's highly dangerous. So you have millions of hectoliters of wine who arrives from the south. You have wheat. You have every kind of building raw materials. And you have to make the organization of the river so that the enormous quantity of trunks who arrives don't destroy the ships with the wine. So just try to understand what kind of police you have to organize, and you have to organize with problem of intermittency of the river. What succeeded in 1783 is that you have a summer of low tide, dry summer and hot summer, very low tide. The trunks don't arrive, and immediately at the beginning of the autumn, freezing of the river, no trunks, and you have in the literature, in the winter of '83, for the first time of his history, Parisian people had to burn wet wood, and arrived the smog, the first smog of the history of Paris. These are the problems that you address when you have to manage with extremely weak administration, no more than 100, 200 persons to manage Paris, all the life of the city. So I think that one interesting dimension of this society is that what we want is go back to a very short circuit of providing. But the management of this kind of system is completely built on extremely strong institutional arrangement. If we don't understand that, we have anarchic system, because the 500,000 person with no electricity, no refrigeration, no train, is now a refugee camp after a major emergency, humanitarian emergency. It's not something which can have economic growth, demographic growth, some kind of security. So we have to make this prior hypothesis to understand what is energy management in this old and pre-fossil fuel society. I will make two brief inquiries to explain where we find energy. The first is very easy. In the northwestern Europe, during 11th, but perhaps more 12th century, oxen are substituted by horses. Something that we can find is in the records of archive. There is no theory of what succeed when instead of 2 oxen, you have 2 horses. But horses is a very strong animal, very fast animal, and it changed completely the management and the agriculture. This is beautiful. This is probably it's 13th century. It may have been some kind of tombstone of a plowman. I like it because it's completely schematic. The plowman is there. And there you have a very beautiful plow with two axes, the coulter, the plow-share, and this is the regulator. So it's a very up-to-date plow. There could have been a horse, but there is no. What you can see is that this is asymmetric. The difference between the hard and the plow, the hard, which is in French the arrière, and the plow, which is the chariot. The hard is symmetric. It's only a knife which opens the soil. The plow has this asymmetric device which put aside a part of the earth. You can see that this man has a strange attitude, because you see that this handle is higher than this one. It's an asymmetric press, because when the plow starts, the pressure on this part make the plow go from the side or the other side. And you have to put it right. So you have the horse, which is very nervous animal. And you can, with the horse, cultivate very heavy soils, the greasy soils, which makes the best crops. But this man has to be a strong man. He is 80 kilos. He has to be heavy. And so this is a kind of transition from this moment. What we know of the plowmen in the literature, they are heavy men. They are high and very strong. And the wife of the plowman are strong person with usually 15 boys and girls. So it's a kind, it's a specific device which links the man, the machine, and the horses. What you have also to think, because we know it from statistical figures at the end of the 18th century, that with this kind of thing, you have an, how do you say, abrasion, rubbing, a very strong rubbing of the plowshare. And the horseshoes are the place where there is a very, very intense pressure when the plow goes forwards. And at the end of the 18th century, with probably better iron that we are that in this moment, for every hectare cultivated in northern France, you have a loss of 1 to 6 kilos of iron inside the earth. So, 1 to 6
per year.
Per year, yearly. France is, I don't know, 60 million hectare of agricultural makes the sum, and you have something which is extremely interesting, because it was said this morning that we have, no, yes, this morning, that we have an extremely steel intensive system. But this is also very steel intensive from the moment when you put the horses in your field. But horse is a very, very luxurious machine. You have to feed it every day. And when you have horses, you have to devote 20%, 30% of your field to oats to feed your own horses. So it's a complicated calculation to, and so I think this is a real transition, and which is made around Paris and around London in the same moment, and consent to feed the cities, because it's the problem with 2 horses. You can cultivate every year 12 hectares of land. With an oxen, half, and with a shovel and 1 man, 1 hectare. So it's a very great difference. And in this device, you have some explanation for the gain of productivity which explain urbanization. You have no urbanization without this kind of device. I don't speak about China. China has different thing. Rice and the technology of rice field should be another explanation and a completely other way of organizing resources and wealth. Okay, that's last thing. There is also a problem of intermittency. You don't use your horses in the fields every day, but you have to feed them every day. So horses may be lent to the city for transport service in between the periods of field labor. So it's something which is which has to be explored because it's very important. Second, and I take 5 minutes for that, a little case study, a micro case study. We are in central Normandy. I will show you a map. In the beginning of the 14th century. Only a set of documents in the Paris archive where there is a dispute between the Cistercian monks of La Trappe and some royal official. The problem is that they have decided to sell wood for fuel, and the royal administration says forest resources bear a tax which is a 40% add value tax. So, and surely there is many money inside. We are, so Évreux is 100 kilometers and, at the west of Paris, and Chartres is 50 kilometers here. It's a beautiful place, but very, very poor, with a lot of iron ore, and it's probably the most near iron production district of Paris. I put because the text is nice, but we have an inquiry, and the inquiry said that the wood which is sold by the monks had been sown and grew on fields, and these fields were when the witnesses were children, were cropped in rye, and there is no doubt in the inquiry. So that is, I found the text 20 years ago, and 1 year ago I said no, it's more complicated and more interesting than I thought. So the argument of the monks is, it's not forest, it's in the field. So you have no right to a tax because your tax is a forest tax. And it's our fields, and we are a religious person, and we are tax-free on our fields. So we have a niche fiscal, perfect, for something which is really some kind of biofuel. The sentence, I go fast, triumph for the monk, the central court says they are right. And they said also, which is extremely cruel for the royal officer, you have to give back the money. So that's something very important. The case is interesting, but we can make some other statements. How comes that the monks decide to put trees on fields? What is the idea? So we have to look at what is the surroundings. Here we have hundreds of foragers who need huge quantity of food. They are little foragers. And we have figures. Around Glos-la-Ferrière, one of the, at least 200 foragers. And we have, which is very exceptional, we have the amount of food which is necessary for one furnace. And it's less than 5 hectares of coppice. Coppice is taillis. And so, in this area, only using this figure, yes, you have at least 18,000 hectares with a 20 years rotation, which is normal, which should be normal for the coppice. It's not something little. And we have other figures in the forest of Orbec. Clearly, they are cutting the high stand, the futaie, to make not beautiful timber, but fuel. And the rotation of the coppice is 10 years. And in the forest of Saint-Évroult, you have 6 years. At 6 years, your forest is dead. So we have the evidence of a very, very heavy crisis of the wood in this region, where the wood is absolutely necessary for the iron production, which is necessary for Paris. So we can understand that the monks decided to crop wood instead of grain. There is also a specific aspect. In this region, I don't know whether some of you know it, it's a pine region. It's not oak region. It's, you have pine forests which are old pine forests, and pine is not a good wood for the charcoal. So there is another incentive for the monks, which is to provide excellent, probably oak wood in cropped in their fields. But you have also a last aspect, which is that exactly in the year where the inquiry is done, it's the worst famine of the medieval time. 1315, 1317, probably a great climatic accident, I think some kind of volcano, or 3 years without crop. And it's interesting to know that probably they never made again the choice of cropping wood instead of grain. So we have also the problem of choosing between biofuel and food in this in the field. This is it's not very, very clear, but you see that it's a beautiful pine forest. What is the end of this story? It's absolutely moral end. 30 years after, the plague arrives, kills half of the population, and there is absolutely no more ecological crisis in Europe. We have always to think that plague is a solution for many problems. But we have to think also that if plague is a solution, we are almost all dead. The other thing is that we have an experiment in innovation. We can see that from the end of the 13th century, there is a reflection on the rapport of resources, forest resources and field resources, and we had choices made to in a certain kind of direction. The other end of the story is that we are in 1320, so 1 century and a half after plague, after the 100 years, in a completely devastated country, arrives a new way of making iron, that is high furnace. And high furnace is not 5 hectares of wood yearly. It's 500 hectares yearly. So it's a completely different way of management of the country. And you have 1 in this region, you will have 10 in the Great Forest along the border of Brittany and Normandy, enormous forest, where you can put this enormous machine which can make huge quantity of iron and cast iron, and you have a completely different way of specialization, a regional specialization of the economy and of the landscape. So inside this discourse, you can choose the energetic way of thinking. Forest is energy. You can choose commercial and industrial way of telling the story, or you can choose the political way of telling the story. You have issue of governance because someone has to decide these extremely important changes in the landscapes. Thank you.